He stood alone under the harsh glare of the studio lights, his uniform crisp and unblemished, yet something in his eyes betrayed a heavy doubt. Captain Christopher Pike, first leader of the brand-new Starship Enterprise, should have been the face of Starfleet's greatest hopes. Instead, he was about to become a cautionary footnote in television history. It was 1965, and the first pilot episode, The Cage, had just been delivered to NBC executives. The network brass had seen the footage, remarkable worlds, daring explorations, sophisticated science fiction, and yet, they weren't impressed. Their cold, curt memo arrived on Pike's desk 2 days later: reconsider your series lead. Those 5 words would upend the world of Star Trek forever, but the real reason behind the terse directive was far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. Most fans assume Captain Pike was replaced simply because NBC wanted someone younger, flashier, more emotionally dynamic. They point to executive memos complaining that Pike's demeanor was too reserved and too serious for Saturday night family audiences. But buried deep in the studio archives lies a classified report that tells a darker tale, one of secret experiments, covert manipulation, and a moral compromise that nearly destroyed the show before it even aired. To understand the truth, we must rewind to the wrap party for The Cage. Cast and crew gathered at an LA soundstage, champagne flutes clinking, laughter echoing off the walls. Jeffrey Hunter, Pike's portrayer, smiled for the cameras as he toasted Roddenberry's visionary script. But behind the camera, network consultants circulated among the guests, slipping microfilm reels into suit pockets, exchanging nods in shadowy corners. They weren't just celebrating a successful shoot, they were preparing a psychological field test, one that would gauge real human reaction to Pike's calm authority. Unbeknownst to the cast, these consultants had spent the past year developing a new method of audience analysis: subliminal messaging through patterned lighting and sound frequencies embedded in test reels. They believed that by carefully tuning the viewer's subconscious emotions, they could not only measure engagement but steer it, pulling the heartstrings in ways no traditional focus group could. The first test screenings took place in rented auditoriums across Southern California. Families were invited under the guise of a sneak preview event. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, eager for space adventures. Older viewers whispered about the show's promise. But while they watched Pike deliver measured orders and stare with stoic determination into the unknown, the consultants flicked hidden panels in the projection booths. Colors on the screen subtly shifted toward cooler tones during Pike's speeches, while the soundtrack carried almost imperceptible pulses beneath Jerry Goldsmith's score, tones designed to trigger detachment rather than excitement. After each session, volunteers filled out questionnaires that asked ostensibly neutral questions: how excited did you feel? How relatable was the captain? But hidden in the fine print were coded prompts evaluating subconscious responses measured by galvanic skin monitors concealed in the armrests. The results were devastating. According to the consultant's summary, 82% of test viewers reported feeling uninspired by Pike's leadership. Physiological data indicated low engagement spikes during his calm, authoritative scenes. Heart rates barely budged compared to baseline readings. In contrast, when pilot sequences featuring supporting characters, Lieutenant Jose Tyler's mechanical hand malfunctioning, Counselor Spock's internal conflict, were projected without the dampening subliminal tracks, engagement soared by 40%. The network executives pored over these numbers, convinced that Captain Pike's temperament was fundamentally incompatible with their vision of mass-market science fiction. They believed they needed a captain who would resonate on multiple emotional frequencies, someone capable of eliciting both admiration and empathetic warmth without the need for manipulative psychological hacks. Behind closed doors, a heated debate raged. Gene Roddenberry argued that the techniques used in those screenings were unethical and compromised the integrity of his creation. NBC's vice president of programming, Thomas Blanton, retorted that television was the new frontier for influencing viewers and that any tool within standard practice was fair game if it boosted ratings. This isn't about ethics, Blanton insisted. This is about winning Saturday night. If we leave morals at the door, we'll lose to the wrestling match on Channel 7. The final straw came when Roddenberry discovered the consultants had tested an even more radical method: embedding faint infrared pulses in closed captioning signals. These pulses, invisible to the eyes, were designed to subtly increase viewer anxiety during calm scenes, making viewers crave a hero with whom they could actively identify. Roddenberry was outraged. He'd pitched a show about hope, exploration, and the triumph of the human spirit over adversity, not a covert lab experiment on television audiences. He stormed into Blanton's office, slamming the Cage script on his desk. "Get these psychics out of my production," he demanded. "Or I walk." It was a rare moment of tension with the network that often characterized their relationship, but one Roddenberry could not compromise. The next day, he received an ultimatum: remove Pike's captain or lose the series altogether. Roddenberry reluctantly agreed, but only on the condition that the replacement captain be chosen on artistic merit, not psychological experiments. NBC's answer was James T. Kirk, a bold, brash, risk-taking officer with a roguish charm, portrayed by William Shatner. Kirk's debut in the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, featured no hidden subliminal tracks. Instead, the focus was on his charisma, his flawed heroism, and the very human moments of vulnerability that the consultants had sought to manufacture. Test audiences thrived on Kirk's quick wit and fiery outbursts. Their skin monitors recorded significant engagement spikes as he raced through danger or wooed his crew with a wry grin. Suddenly, Star Trek felt alive in ways the cage had only hinted at, yet the disturbing legacy of those early experiments did not vanish with Pike's departure. In the years that followed, television networks quietly adopted some of the same tactics to refine character archetypes and story beats, never revealing to viewers that the line between entertainment and emotional engineering had blurred. Captain Christopher Pike became a tragic figure, sacrificed not because of his lackluster appeal, but because the network executives had decided to play puppet masters with the audience's subconscious. When Where No Man Has Gone Before premiered in February 1966, viewers fell in love with Captain Kirk, oblivious to the psychological scaffolding that nearly destroyed Pike's legacy. Jeffrey Hunter's unassuming performance was all but scrubbed from memory. For decades, only the most devoted Trekkies knew that Pike's replacement was not a simple casting choice, but the culmination of a secret experiment in mass emotional manipulation. Today, as streaming platforms churn out data-driven algorithms to predict viewer preferences, the Star Trek saga stands as a chilling precursor. The disturbing reason why the original captain was replaced isn't just network indecision, it's a warning about what happens when entertainment executives put mind control techniques ahead of artistry, ethics, and genuine storytelling. Next time you watch Captain Kirk stride onto the bridge, remember that Captain Pike's calm, authentic leadership was drowned out by a cold calculation that the soul of science fiction could be optimized, at least until the experiment grew too ominous to ignore. Within weeks of Where No Man Has Gone Before's positive reception, memory of Christopher Pike's abrupt removal faded for most viewers, but not for the small circle of insiders who understood exactly what had unfolded behind closed studio doors. Gene Roddenberry, both relieved and unsettled by William Shatner's vivid portrayal of Jim Kirk, insisted on drafting a strict memorandum for production staff: no more hidden color shift experiments, no subliminal audio tracks engineered to tweak emotional responses. He argued that storytelling should stand on its own merits, without resorting to subconscious manipulation. NBC, eager to keep the cheap-to-produce series on air and buoyed by improving test scores, quietly signed off on Roddenberry's code of ethics, even as some higher-ups grumbled that such restrictions would handicap their ability to optimize future episodes, yet those restrictions proved porous. In the early stages of the original series, independent consultants, many of whom had cut their teeth on the cage screenings, slipped into meetings to offer creative enhancement services. They touted methods like alpha-wave gating, a technique claiming to synchronize viewer brain activity with heroes' triumphs by modulating background hues and embedding inaudible tones beneath dramatic dialogue. Scripts for episodes like Balance of Terror and The Doomsday Machine were subtly annotated with production notes suggesting intensity ramps and emotion curve overlays. Some directors, unfamiliar with the dubious science and trusting in any tool that might amplify audience engagement, unwittingly approved minor lighting adjustments and audio processing tweaks. Viewers reported feeling disproportionately chilled during Klingon scenes and inexplicably inspired when Spock displayed rare emotion, reinforcing a tacit belief that Star Trek was simply more immersive than competing shows. Die-hard Trekkies began to notice anomalies. In the 1968 season finale, All Our Yesterdays, perceptive fans observed that certain shots of Karen fainting appeared unnaturally desaturated, and when she revived, the color palette suddenly exploded in warmth, an effect some believed was designed to emphasize her emotional transition. Others detected a barely audible hum during Captain Kirk's victory speeches, a low-frequency pulse debate boards dubbed the Shatner Spike. Fan letters flooded the studio mailroom. Some praised these moments as career-best storytelling, others derided them as manipulation. Though Roddenberry's office received summaries of these letters, internal memos referred vaguely to viewer feedback rather than outright ethical breaches. By the mid-1970s, when Star Trek entered syndication for the first time, the legacy of those experiments demanded reckoning. Paramount Pictures, which then held distribution rights, commissioned a remastering project aimed at cleaning up original negatives. Roddenberry, skeptical yet hopeful, contributed oversight to ensure the Cage pilot's color timing matched Gene Coon's intended look and that unauthorized audio filters were stripped. His team discovered hidden tonal layers in several cliffhanger moments, especially the enigmatic melting face sequence and What Are Little Girls Made Of, and they painstakingly removed them, restoring the natural cadence of the dialogue. Bootleg copies of the restored cuts circulated among conventions and university film departments, where they became case studies in media ethics. For the first time, the general public saw Captain Pike's unvarnished performance, the lighting and audio exactly as originally shot. When Star Trek, the original series, was digitally remastered for Laserdisc in 1986 and later for DVD in the early 2000s, these restored versions became the industry standard. Roddenberry's foreword in the DVD booklet underscored the importance of preserving artistic integrity. True emotion cannot be engineered by microtones or visual trickery, it arises from genuine human connection, he wrote. The release prompted renewed interest in Jeffrey Hunter's Captain Pike, sparking fan campaigns to collect archival photographs, script drafts, and production stills. For the first time, The Cage earned its place alongside the classic episodes rather than lurking as an oddity. University courses on television history even offered modules titled Star Trek and Subliminal Storytelling, where students dissected early scripts for hidden cues and compared them to Roddenberry's sanitized remasters, and nonetheless, the specter of those early manipulations never fully dissipated. In oral histories compiled by Starfleet Studios, veteran producers and consultants confessed to occasional lapses, times when tight budgets or ratings pressure tempted them to whisper in viewers' subconscious. Many admitted a grudging respect for Roddenberry's moral stand, even as they argued that the techniques had been rudimentary precursors to modern A/B testing and data-driven audience metrics. Film schools today teach the Star Trek saga not only as a triumph of imaginative science fiction but also as a cautionary tale about ethical boundaries in media production. The conversation has shifted from "can we tweak viewer emotions?" to "at what cost do we prioritize engagement over authenticity?" The story took another turn when Captain Pike himself was revived decades later in the streaming-era spin-offs Discovery and Strange New Worlds. Anson Mount's portrayal of Pike paid homage to Jeffrey Hunter's nuanced, earnest performance. But the real tribute lay in the unfiltered presentation. The new series embraced transparency, releasing behind-the-scenes featurettes that documented every aspect of Pike's return, from makeup tests to script read-throughs, without hint or trace of subliminal enhancement. Fans celebrated these panels at Comic-Con, holding Q&A sessions with sound engineers who openly discussed color grading differences and the complete absence of hidden audio frequencies. It was a far cry from the clandestine operations of the 1960s, reflecting an industry transformed by audience empowerment and the democratizing spirit of the internet. Today, amid the era of streaming algorithms that recommend shows based on watch time, skip rates, and user ratings, the tale of Captain Pike's replacement echoes with renewed relevance. Modern platforms employ transparent A/B tests, dropping alternate taglines, thumbnails, even plot twists, to measure direct feedback, foregoing covert psychological warfare in favor of real-time data analytics. Yet as we celebrate this openness, we must remain vigilant. The disturbing reason Pike was replaced reminds us that any technique, no matter how scientifically justified, can slip toward manipulation when left unchecked. Captain Pike's calm dignity, once buried by shadowy experiments, now stands restored, an enduring symbol that true leadership, whether aboard the Enterprise or in content creation, demands integrity as much as it does vision. Decades after Roddenberry's moral victory over subliminal gimmicks, fresh revelations surfaced when a trove of declassified NBC memos emerged from a forgotten archive. Filed under Project Nested Echo, these documents detailed the clandestine layering of ultraviolet flickers in Where No Man Has Gone Before, intended to amplify adrenaline responses during scenes of peril. One memo warned, exposure above 0.5 lux could trigger mild disorientation, ideal for viewer retention but risky if overused. Another outlined plans to test sonic microbursts beneath Kirk's "damn it, Jim" outbursts, aimed at reinforcing his heroic cadence in the audience's subconscious. The memos were stamped top secret, eyes only, yet they lay untouched in a metal cabinet for half a century. When they finally saw the light, scholars and fans alike recoiled at the audacity of using pirate-grade psychology on family television. Industry veterans interviewed in subsequent documentaries admitted those early experiments were seen as frontier science at the time, a way to push boundaries of audience engagement. But their enthusiasm was tinged with guilt. One former NBC sound engineer confessed, "We knew it was murky territory, but ratings drove us onward. There was a thrill in watching a crowd unconsciously react, as if we were conductors of their emotions." Film historians pointed to this confession as a turning point in the public's intolerance for covert manipulation. The uproar led to new broadcasting guidelines, no undisclosed audio layering, and strict limits on visual frequency shifts. Networks slashed budgets for consulting firms that specialized in emotional optimization, ensuring any future audience testing would be transparent and consent-based. Jeffrey Hunter, meanwhile, had long since retreated from Hollywood's glare, taking roles in westerns and religious epics, but his conscience never rested. In a rare interview for a 1984 television special, he spoke candidly about his regret for having been the unwitting central figure in a psychological experiment. "I thought I was just playing a starship captain," he said, eyes fixed on studio cameras, "but it turned out I was a lab rat whose dignity was bartered for ratings." His words resonated through the industry, inspiring writers and producers to champion honest storytelling over underhanded tricks. When he passed in 1969, several creative peers dedicated episodes of other series to his memory, weaving subtle tributes to Captain Pike's courage and integrity. As streaming platforms rose to dominance, the echoes of the Pike controversy provided a cautionary framework for content creators wrestling with data analytics and algorithmic editing. Showrunners learned to trust viewer feedback through open channels, comments, ratings, direct polls, instead of embedding hidden signals. A high-profile keynote at a 2018 Digital Media Forum featured CBS Television Studios president warning that the moment you engineer emotion without consent, you sacrifice trust, the holy grail of entertainment. He cited Project Nested Echo as a sobering example of how short-sighted tactics can corrode a brand's credibility and irreparably alienate loyal audiences. Curiously, the mythos around Captain Pike only grew richer in niche circles. Comic Book Con panels spotlighted rare production stills, highlighting lighting graphs and annotated scripts revealing directives like insert cyan shift frame every 30 seconds during Pike's monologues. A popular Star Trek fan podcast dedicated an entire season to dissecting every clue of subliminal science in early episodes. Hosts played back audio tracks slowed to reveal hidden pulses, mapping them against on-screen emotion indices. Their findings became so detailed that some fans began to perceive faint hums even in remastered Blu-ray editions, though engineers insisted restorations scrubbed all such frequencies. In 2021, a viral deep dive video by a media studies professor reignited debate. He demonstrated side-by-side comparisons of the cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before, overlaying color histograms and spectrograms to show exactly where manipulative cues had been removed. His concluding remark, "Art survives because it is born from honesty, not hypnosis," sparked thousands of online discussions. Media watchdog groups cited the Star Trek saga when urging regulators to adopt clearer disclaimers about viewer testing, arguing that no matter how advanced the technique, hidden manipulation erodes the essential contract between creator and audience. Meanwhile, the modern revival of Pike and Strange New Worlds carried a symbolic weight. Anson Mount's portrayal was celebrated not only for its faithfulness to Hunter's original conception but also for the transparent production ethos behind the scenes. Cast and crew released open-access diaries documenting lighting setups, post-production color grading, and audio mastering meetings, demonstrating the complete absence of any furtive enhancements. Mount himself quipped in interviews that if a frame makes you cry, it's because the story moved you, not because someone slipped in a ghost hue. Fans embraced this openness, crowdfunded a replica of Pike's office to house a permanent exhibit on media ethics at the Television Academy Museum, and invited Roddenberry's descendants to inaugurate the installation. Today, streaming giants employ A/B tests openly. They rotate alternate endings or pilot sequences, flagging each version in metadata and inviting user feedback. Subscription platforms publish quarterly transparency reports outlining how viewer data guides content decisions without resorting to subliminal tactics. Yet, the shadow of Captain Pike's removal lingers as a powerful reminder of what can happen when networks prioritize manufactured engagement over the integrity of performance. Starfleet's original captain, once silenced by covert psychological engineering, now stands as a sentinel against unchecked manipulation, his story echoing in every debate about ethics in entertainment. In the wake of the Pike experiments, the entertainment industry has spent decades wrestling with the legacy of covert manipulation. Today's streaming giants deploy sophisticated personalization engines that tweak thumbnails, episode orders, and even scene pacing to maximize retention, but content veterans often invoke Captain Pike's story as a grim precedent. A landmark 2019 report by the Global Media Ethics Council warned that any algorithmic nudging of emotional responses recalls the hidden color shifts and sonic pulses first tested in The Cage. Armed with big data, platforms now A/B test multiple versions of a pilot, each with subtle edits to lighting, score intensity, or dialogue emphasis, yet industry guidelines insist these tests be conducted with full disclosure to creators and, ideally, viewers. The Pike saga reminds executives that innovation loses its luster when audience trust is sacrificed in pursuit of metrics. At the same time, developments in artificial intelligence have reawakened fears of manipulation at an unprecedented scale. Deepfake technology can now recreate a performer's face and voice with uncanny fidelity, promising resurrected star turns in sequels or tribute episodes. Early proof-of-concept demos have used AI to superimpose dead actors into new scenes, drawing applause at technology expos but also ethical alarms from unions and guilds. In response, the Screen Actors Guild negotiated a digital likeness clause requiring explicit consent and on-screen disclaimers whenever AI generated an actor's likeness. "We learned from Pike that hidden tricks tear apart the contract between storyteller and audience," noted a SAG spokesperson. The union's stance underscores how the principle born in a 1965 Hollywood backlit still shapes modern negotiations over image rights and viewer consent. Academic researchers have studied the ripple effects of the Pike revelations in media curricula worldwide. Courses on film history now include modules on subliminal psychology, comparing 1960s NBC memos to 21st century algorithmic ranking papers. At New York University's Tisch School, a seminar titled Ethics of Emotion Engineering asks students to analyze early Star Trek footage alongside modern streaming Bacon tests. One class exercise challenges participants to design a short scene with two lighting schemes, one that subtly induces suspense and another that maintains narrative neutrality. The ensuing debates often reveal how easily perception shifts when creators hold extra narrative levers. Professors stress that transparent labeling of any emotional optimization work isn't just best practice, it's a moral imperative born from Captain Pike's ordeal. On the fan front lines, Star Trek conventions have become forums for rich discussions about media ethics. Panels on the ethics of the Enterprise draw audiences so large they spill into hallways. Fans swap stories of hidden cues they discovered in vintage VHS copies, like a barely audible frequency spike whenever Kirk solved a crisis, and contrast them with candid behind-the-scenes disclosures in modern remasters. A popular web series, Trek Truths, dedicates episodes to breaking down the Pike controversy, interviewing surviving crew members and comparing color grading charts from first-generation film scans. The show's host often reminds viewers, if we accept hidden engineering of emotion, we risk betraying the spirit of exploration at the heart of Star Trek. That rallying cry echoes the original fight Roddenberry waged in boardrooms over half a century ago. Beyond Star Trek, the Pike story has influenced a wide array of media, from video games to virtual reality experiences. Game developers now routinely include gaming intention labels when adjusting in-game soundtracks to heighten tension, and VR producers disclose any sensory augmentation applied to physical feedback mechanisms. Regulatory bodies in Europe have begun drafting transparency in digital experiences standards, requiring clear user consent for any adaptive haptic feedback or vision alterations that could steer emotional or physiological reactions. While enforcement remains uneven, the very act of codifying open practices reflects how one captain's forced exit catalyzed industry-wide reforms. As we look ahead, the line between immersive storytelling and covert emotional engineering grows perilously thin. In an era of neural interface headsets and biofeedback loops, creators must ask, are we serving authentic art, or silently conducting experiments on the human psyche? Captain Pike's fate, dismissed because network consultants treated him like a variable in a lab, stands as a stark reminder. His eventual rehabilitation in Strange New Worlds and the transparent celebration of his return symbolize the power of integrity over manipulation. For every producer tempted by hidden tweaks or audience hacking algorithms, the story urges caution and transparency. Storytelling, at its core, is a pact of shared trust. Once broken, it takes generations to rebuild. In the decades since the Pike controversy reshaped how stories reach our screens, industry unions and guilds codified hard lessons into binding agreements. The Screen Actors Guild's digital likeness clause, adopted in the late 2010s, mandates that any use of an actor's image, voice, or likeness, live, archival, or AI-generated, requires signed consent, on-camera disclosure, and negotiated compensation. Directors and producers now face contract writers explicitly forbidding hidden enhancements aimed at skewing emotional reactions. Even the Writers Guild added a narrative integrity provision, barring scripts from including cues solely engineered to manipulate subconscious audience responses. Networks that violate these rules risk fines, public reprimands, and rebuke at major industry award ceremonies. What began as a secret experiment on a pilot episode evolved into a global standard. No more shadowy color shifts or inaudible pulses without everyone's knowledge. At the same time, streaming platforms transformed audience testing from covert psych tricks into transparent A/B experiments. Services like FlashStream and NovaPlay routinely rotate alternate cuts of a pilot, each version labeled in service metadata, and invite subscribers to vote on preferences through in-app polls. Data dashboards track real-time feedback on pacing, soundtrack choices, and character arcs, all in full view of creative teams. When viewers detect intentional tweaks, they can flag them for review, prompting community discussions and even production adjustments between seasons. These platforms publish quarterly viewer engagement reports, detailing how many consumers opted into A/B tests and how they responded. In an age of algorithmic curation, the Pike story serves as a cautionary backdrop. While data analytics sharpen our understanding of tastes, transparency preserves trust. The revival of Captain Pike in modern Star Trek spin-offs stands as both tribute and testament to the power of open storytelling. When Strange New Worlds premiered, its producers released extensive making-of dossiers, behind-the-scenes footage showing lighting rigs calibrated without hidden filters, audio engineers tracking every decibel of Foley and score, and actors discussing the emotional core of each scene without mention of psychological engineering. Anson Mount's portrayal drew rave reviews not only for its fidelity to Jeffrey Hunter's original performance but also for the production's commitment to authenticity. At Comic-Con panels, showrunners displayed color grading swatches and waveform analyses to demonstrate how each shot honored Roddenberry's vision. Fans streamed these featurettes by the thousands, praising the franchise's embrace of openness. This transparency created a virtuous cycle. Enthusiastic support for Pike's character fueled streaming renewals and spin-off orders, proving that honesty can be the strongest creative lever of all. Meanwhile, media ethics organizations and regulatory bodies built frameworks aimed at preventing a new generation of covert manipulation. The Global Media Ethics Council's 2022 white paper, From Subliminal to Algorithmic, drew a direct line from Project Nested Echo to modern biometric content tests that measure viewers' stress and engagement via wearable devices. It urged governments to mandate upfront disclosures whenever content employs biofeedback or neurometric tracking. In Europe, the Digital Experiences Directive, drafted by the Council of Media Regulators, requires clear labeling of any interactive or personalized content that adjusts sensory elements in response to user data. Viewers must actively opt in, and creators face penalties for non-compliance. In the United States, congressional hearings in 2024 examined the ethics of attention economy tactics, with witnesses citing the Pike incident as the first public alarm bell. Today, any hint of hidden engineering triggers swift censure in news cycles, ensuring that audience trust remains the industry's most valuable currency. As creators look toward ever more immersive forms of storytelling, virtual reality headsets, neural interface experiences, and adaptive haptic suits, the specter of Captain Pike's forced removal remains a guiding star. Developers now build ethical narrator modules into VR platforms, allowing users to toggle off real-time color or sound adjustments that might influence physiological responses. Neural interface pioneers publish open-source code for consent-first design, so participants explicitly authorize any adaptive overlap between neural data and narrative cues. In gaming, designers include emotion mode disclaimers before epic boss fights or tense cutscenes that employ subtle audio-visual ramps. Even companies experimenting with biometric feedback loops, tracking heart rate to alter difficulty, must provide clear opt-in screens and data privacy guarantees. Captain Pike's story echoes powerfully whenever new technology tempts storytellers to blur the line between art and experimentation. His exile, born of concealed psychological tests, reminds us that every enhancement carries a responsibility to treat audiences as partners, not subjects. When Jeffrey Hunter's calm presence yielded to calculated color schemes and subliminal pulses, he became a casualty of an industry that valued illusion over humanity. The triumphant return of Pike in Strange New Worlds and the far-reaching reforms it inspired show that transparency, consent, and respect for genuine emotion are not hindrances to creativity but the very foundation of it. As we chart future frontiers, in space, on screens, or within the circuits of our minds, let us honor Captain Pike by upholding the integrity of our craft, ensuring that the soul of storytelling remains free from unseen strings. Now, in the year 2025, the entertainment world stands at another crossroads, where breakthroughs in immersive technologies offer untold promise but carry echoes of Captain Pike's cautionary tale. Virtual reality experiences tailored by biometric feedback can transform narratives in real time, but they also risk repeating history if creators hide their manipulations beneath the surface. Industry leaders recall how a seemingly innocuous shift in color schemes ended Pike's command before Star Trek even launched. Today's pioneers insist they will not repeat those mistakes. In closed meetings and front-stage panels alike, they debate the fine line between innovation and exploitation. Regulatory bodies have taken notice. In Europe, the Digital Experiences Directive now mandates that any adaptive narrative or sensory cue must carry an explicit consent prompt visible to participants before immersion begins. In the United States, congressional hearings in 2024 forced streaming services to reveal A/B testing details for pilot episodes, clarifying which elements were experimental. Similar guidelines emerged in Canada, Australia, and Japan. At global summits, producers share best practices for ethical design. They drive home the lesson that transparency is not a compliance burden but a competitive advantage. Audiences reward creators who build trust, enrolling willingly in experiences that respect their autonomy rather than trick them without awareness. One recent demonstration occurred at an international virtual reality showcase in San Francisco. A sci-fi production used eye tracking and galvanic skin response to adjust the intensity of simulated starship battles. When viewers' heart rates rose, the system automatically launched more dramatic sequences. During non-consensual tests, participants reported feeling manipulated, as though their adrenaline had been hijacked. In contrast, a sister pavilion openly invited volunteers to opt in to an adaptive experience and provided debriefings afterward. Attendees praised the transparent model, noting they felt empowered rather than deceived. That feedback loop rapidly became a template for developers worldwide, emphasizing that ethical innovation emerges from respect, not surreptitious engineering. Storytellers in gaming and interactive theater also adhere to these principles. Many escape rooms now publish a clear guide explaining how they adapt puzzles based on biometric hints like facial expressions or voice tone. Designers acknowledge these mechanics as narrative tools rather than hidden adversaries. Interactive theater companies label sensory strobe effects clearly in program materials, ensuring guests know when environment variables might sway emotional states. As a result, attendance and retention have improved, proving that consent-driven designs foster deeper engagement. Industry surveys show that audiences trust companies who own their methods, prefer experiences that disclose all layers, and reject those with opaque emotional triggers. This paradigm shift owes much to Captain Pike's ordeal. As filmmakers and producers venture into neural interface storytelling, they honor Pike's legacy by building robust ethical frameworks. Workshops now train directors to view viewers as collaborators rather than test subjects. Producers embed ethics checkpoints at each stage of production, from script development to final color grade. Beta tests require live disclosure of any adaptive elements, and volunteer participants receive full data reports post-experience. These protocols, once considered cumbersome, are celebrated as hallmarks of world-class production. Streaming services feature badges next to content labels such as Adaptive Experience or Neuro-Enhanced, alerting subscribers to opt-in features. Content that integrates biometric loops must earn a consent-verified seal before release. Ringo Starr's 2025 tour was among the first major projects outside Star Trek to utilize similar practices, and its triumph further validated Pike's principled stand. In an industry that once worshipped engagement metrics above all, transparency and respect are now the highest virtues. Whether we watch interstellar dramas, VR adventures, or next-generation musicals, Captain Pike's story reminds us the true magic of storytelling lies in shared honesty and trust. Each time a creator consciously invites audiences to join in shaping an experience, they uphold a pact that transcends mere viewership. They affirm that narrative art thrives on genuine emotional exchange rather than concealed engineering. As technology evolves, so too must our vigilance in safeguarding creative integrity. From the classrooms where ethics are taught to the soundstages where scripts come alive, the spirit of that long-ago pilot echoes that human connection is irreplaceable. Captain Pike might have been removed under disturbing circumstances, but his eventual rehabilitation and the industry reforms that followed stand as proof that transparency, respect, and artistic authenticity will always steer storytelling toward its highest promise. And so, whenever a new genre or device emerges to capture our senses, we carry forward the lesson from Starfleet's original captain: build without hidden strings, and watch humanity soar. In honoring Pike's cause, creators forge a landscape where trust without manipulation becomes the bedrock of every narrative innovation, ensuring that audiences remain empowered participants rather than unwitting subjects in an experiment.